Okay, that's 5:29. We'll call to order the Safety Committee meeting, and Councilman Panzera is present, and Councilwoman Houston is absent and excused. And we have one agenda item. It's the ordinance to amend and enact the codified ordinance of the City of Grandview Heights to ban the sale of flavored tobacco products and to create a tobacco retail licensing program. Tonight is the second reading, and we have Eric West from the Franklin County, I'm sorry, I was thinking Board of Health, but Franklin County Public Health. Public Health, thank you. And sorry.
I'm sorry, Lindsay Rodenhauser,
Thank
also
you.
with Franklin County Public Health.
Okay, thank you. And so this is the legislation that Councilman Panzera has brought forward, and I was just discussing a little bit with them. I wondered if we could have an overview, because as I read through this, I realized when they were in the legislation, it's talking about putting signs up in the places that will sell the tobacco products, and I think I already assumed that there was some kind of enforcement mechanism in place, and I wasn't aware that that's not the case, and that's what this is looking to establish. And I don't know if you could give a brief overview of that, or?
Yeah, so the state currently has what's called a cigarette retailer license. It is not all-inclusive when it comes to tobacco products. It is really only for cigarettes, and this would be an all-encompassing policy that would include smokeless tobacco, hookah products, cigarettes, as well as vape products. You referred to the signage. There are currently no required signs that are up in retailers that sell tobacco products, but the state does do enforcement for their cigarette retailer license, but again, it doesn't include other tobacco products as well. So this would be a very all-inclusive policy and allow for enforcement of all of those tobacco products. One, making sure they're not selling to minors, people under the age of 21. And then we also have been doing enforcement with the program signs actually being visible where it's required to be displayed based on the city ordinance, as well as that they have their current license, they can produce their current license when we go in to do the checks as well.
And what is the current process for the state for checking on cigarette to make sure they're not selling cigarettes to people who are under 21?
They actually disseminate down to local health departments typically for those. They do also have state audits, but it's I'm not sure how often they actually do get out to do those audits, but they do also disseminate down compliance checks to local health departments. It's just not, I believe it's 2 a year that they do typically, and they're not as robust because they're only checking on the cigarette products, and I don't believe they do, I'm not sure if they actually do the underage purchases or not.
Yes, so they can do the underage purchases. With that though, the underage purchase, if a retailer would sell, it actually is, it goes towards the employee or the purchase, or the person who had sold, and not necessarily the business itself or the owner. So a tobacco retail license really, again, it targets or enforces for the retailer, the owner of the business, and not necessarily the employee who sold.
And then do you know, because this has a function where your agency is working with our city, but in this case with the state, is that happening at that, like your agency is doing this work for the state?
Yes, so we do a small percentage, and Eric can talk a little bit about it, but we have a grant that allows us from the state to do kind of these retail license checks, education, and buys. Again, it's a very small percentage of retails that we're able to touch. And so it's not necessarily encompassing all the retailers within each jurisdiction, Franklin County Public Health Service.
It's not gonna touch the vape shops, it's not gonna
Right.
touch the hookah lounges or cigar lounges. It is really just for the cigarette retailers, so it's, the majority is gas stations, some grocery stores, but it leaves out all of the other tobacco entities.
And then with these different communities that are now passing this, will you be, it will be mandated that you will come, like we have 4 places here in Grandview, that you would come twice a year, as it says in legislation, you'll be here to check and make those.
Yep, it'll be based on what is included in your city ordinance. With Hilliard, who we have launched with already, they are requiring 4 checks for the year. It's 2 compliance checks performed by myself and one of my colleagues, as well as 2 attempted underage purchases conducted by, we have a team of underage purchases, but it's conducted under our supervision as well.
And all of that, after the ordinance is passed, what then we will be able to do is then produce a scope of work, a contract for our services. And all of that based on the ordinance, our legal would draft and produce for you all and sign, and that's how we then execute and begin the work with you all.
Okay, and then the $500 licensing fee, then does that help to cover some of that, or that money comes to us, the city, to help cover that, or that goes to you, but it's covering the cost of
Yes.
this work?
So for the contract purposes, the $500 license fee would come to us. That again covers staff time, supplies, purchases of the signage, education materials that we're going to be giving retailers, their employees. Now, for our other contracted jurisdictions, what we look at then is the fines. So a certain percentage of the fines are, I think it's 20% for most of our jurisdictions, is sent back to us, again, to cover some of those administrative fees, the letters,
I believe it's 90-10.
90/10?
Yeah, I believe
Okay.
it's 90% of any fines would be going to the city, and 10% is coming to our agency.
And then do you have, I don't know if you've already talked about the cost to the city with this legislation, if you have a ballpark on that, on the work, or that's something that'll be done later?
So, I mean, for the work and the time and effort, it really looks at, again, just the legal aspect of if there is a jurisdiction or a retailer who, if we do an underage buy, or again, when we do a check and they may not have their license up to date or not have the correct signage, all of that's documented, is sent, you know, in the report, and then it would be sent to the city for mayor's court. And that's how we've had it set up with the other jurisdictions as well.
Okay.
So,
And
if I
then-
may.
Okay, go.
No, that's, I was gonna say, it might be really helpful just to get a little bit of a foundational baseline
Yep,
as to our relationship with the Franklin County as it stands right now,
okay.
in contrast with other municipalities and specifically like the city of Columbus. And Audrey's very familiar with that.
We do. We have an existing relationship with public health, and we actually have a contract that specifies the scope of services that they currently provide for us. One of those, I mean, they service the building department, do plumbing inspections, food safety inspections, all of that. So we have that we sign each year annually, and then this would be over and above that. But Lindsay, correct me if I'm wrong, the charges, so the $500 and the 10% of the fines, that would cover our costs. There is no additional cost to us over and above to have the TRL contract in place with Franklin County.
correct.
And
Okay.
those
And
fees are actually coming from the retailers
Retailers.
themselves, it's not a city cost.
Right.
The retailers are paying the licensing fee as well as any fine fee that would be associated as
So
well.
this would not add any money to our annual contract that we have with Franklin County Public Health. You would provide all of your existing services and this, which would be covered in and of itself. So-
Through the license fees.
Correct, through the TRL.
Yeah, certainly there's more to crystallize a bit in terms of that contract as it would need to be modified to create this enforcement layer. But the legislation is what's going to drive that effectively. So we don't necessarily have that prepared at this point because the legislation, they're not authorized yet.
Right.
So,
Right, we need
this is the
the
step.
ordinance to go through and pass before we can begin the contracting and legal discussions. Yes.
Do you want to speak to it too?
Yeah, if I may. Thank you again for attending. We appreciate your assistance in this and hopefully look forward to support from this council to engage with you on this basis to pursue this effort and the both short-term and long-term hopeful effects as it relates to our youth addiction with nicotine. Have you, and apologies, we haven't had an opportunity to really interact much prior to just meeting Eric here this evening, but have you reviewed the draft legislation at all?
I have it in front of me, I've looked over it a little bit.
Okay.
Yes.
And just putting it out there, anything that might cause anything of concern or discussion, this would be our open opportunity to kind of iron that out and have some Q&A. Not to put any pressure on you by any stretch, I just was curious whether you'd had an opportunity to see it.
Yeah.
So,
And
wanted to open that up if you.
My understanding was that we had maybe provided the template that we had provided to all cities that have both passed and considered the policy so far. So if there hadn't been any drastic changes from that, it's going to be sort of the standard language that we had encouraged when the conversations initially started.
I would agree, Joelle, as the city
Yeah,
attorney.
it's substantially similar, so basically we tried to sort of incorporate the parts from the sample legislation into our existing ordinance and, you know, cross out things from our existing ordinance that would no longer be in effect. So just as a bright line example, under 523.09 enforcement, the only sentence in our existing ordinance stated, this chapter shall be enforced by the Director of Public Safety and or his or her designees. So we crossed that out and replaced it with the suggested language. I've made some minor edits here and there just to ensure some consistency with the terminology that we already used. But by and large, I don't remember deviating too far from, possibly in the fine structure, just to sort of stay aligned with what we had. But I don't think I made any material changes.
A couple of the things that are in this particular form of legislation that I had not seen in other examples or other forms is that we have a relatively low number of licenses. Is there any concern on the part of the Board of Health that the revenue from those 4 licenses won't sustain? I want to know in advance, kind of. Or is that pretty atypical or pretty typical and expected that if it's a smaller jurisdiction, then there's simply less ground to cover, less licenses in place, so therefore less workload?
Yes.
Yeah, and that really is the expectation. We do have at least one other jurisdiction that has passed a policy already, and I believe they have 3 retailers within the city of Bexley. They also are including a flavor ban, but as far as enforcement, nothing really changes as far as flavor ban enforcement versus
Right.
typical enforcement, just including that detail. I'm not sure if, time and effort should not change, because that really is just based on the number of retailers frankly makes it easier on those doing enforcement to be able to cover everything within the city because there's fewer retailers. I don't know if the draft ordinance includes a date at which the flavor ban would go into effect.
Right.
Okay.
We have that to cover. It's been some of the detail that we haven't discussed, and there was another one I wanted to ask you over here, actually. You mentioned an operation that we did not initially include that might be a component of this.
It's Boston Stoker Coffee Shop, and they sell cigars there.
Which place is it?
Boston Stoker, it went in where Luck Brothers is, and then, so it's like within 1,000 feet, I think, of the, but I think your grandfathering them in 1,000 feet of
Sure, any-
Alexander's and the school, but they do sell cigars.
Okay. Did you hear that response?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and when you refer to grandfathered in, would you be referring to not needing a license, or that they would still be allowed
There are-
to sell the tobacco
Sure.
product just with
Oh.
a license?
If I may, I'll address that. We have language in here specifically regarding distance from it's not a school, what did we define?
Youth-oriented
Youth-oriented facility, thank you. And we have two that are probably already, that one included, are already within that. Our intention is not to, try and create some kind of retroactive effort. So grandfathered is a loose, casual term. I don't want to try and be an attorney about that, but we're not trying to immediately close those operations. We're just simply asking for them to comply with the new regulations that will be put in place. We do have some relatively aggressive revocation language in here that is based upon performance, namely that a revoked license will not be reinstated, nor will it be contributed to the new or existing pool of licenses that are available. If these licenses are revoked, they will not be replaced, which is somewhat firm, but I think it's the right way to approach it for our particular community. There was a couple other details that came up that I want to address openly with the committee, the city attorney as well. We do refer to existing licenses within this, and we need to likely modify that phrasing to something similar to retailers currently engaged in the sale of tobacco or nicotine products, because they don't have licenses yet, so we can't refer to them as licensed. And we should probably give some attention to that operation as the Boston Stoker. I'm kind of unfamiliar. Presumably they need a state cigarette license, or would they not if it's a coffee shop that sells cigars?
I believe because if they do not sell actual cigarettes, so the cigarette retailer license allows them to have access to cigarette distributors. So if it is a cigar only, if they are only selling cigar products, I don't believe they would have the state license.
Okay.
Well, they have a sign up at that you have to be, 21, it's the little tear-off calendar
Yeah.
by this
Yeah.
date, they had that, and if you scan the QR code, it went to just a weed card, 21-year minimum age, resources.
Yep.
But then it's weed cards, 21 law, federal law, so I don't know. But if it's not cigarettes and they're not being
No, so
monitored now.
those WeID calendars is something that we actually are providing for retailers once they are in their license. When we go out and do the retailer education sessions, we're not requiring that they utilize those. Most of the places that I've gone and done the retailer education sessions already have either an electronic or a digital version of that tool, or they already have the paper calendar with, like you mentioned, the tear-off. But that is not, that doesn't fall under any of the state license mandates or anything like that. So it's great that they have the sign up on the door that says they don't allow sales, or on the point of sale that they don't allow sales to anyone under the age of 21, but it wouldn't fall under the state licensing.
too serious at a sidebar, just, I have a distinct privilege of having another attorney sitting next to me, so sometimes sometimes I have an immediate cross-check available.
Just a quick search, Joelle, I don't know, if that- I think there might be a subsidiary license, like you still need a license, but it's not the same.
Okay.
Sort of like how there's, I'm guessing maybe it might be similar to liquor licenses where you've got,
Tiers.
you know, tiers of it. So I've got a carry-out license, but not an on-premises one. I think there might be, you still have to have a tobacco license, but it's not the
Not the
same
principal
as a
license.
cigarette license.
It may be included in the vendor license or under that in some capacity, but
Oh,
my
that could be,
understanding.
because I'm looking at the Department of Taxation.
Okay, yeah.
We could also just expand our definition of retailer to
Mhm.
sort of capture that.
Yeah, you have to have a license under the Department of Taxation to sell any tobacco product, which makes sense.
Joe, I'll have another, not concern, but just something else to point out. I want to make sure that we have a distinct and pronounced separation between flavored nicotine products, which are expressly offered for pleasure, let's
Right.
call it, and those that are affiliated and purposefully intended for cessation programming. So I want to make sure that this does not end up being anything confusing within our ordinance, and certainly not our intention.
Are they considered, do you guys know, are they considered analogous to the smoking flavored tobacco products, or? is
If
it-
you're referring to like a flavored option for nicotine gum,
Inhaler
nicotine
gum, yeah.
lozenges, those, while they are considered a nicotine product, technically, they are not considered a tobacco product
The
because,
pharmaceutical,
yeah, because it is meant for cessation purposes.
Right.
Yep.
right? Just want to be clear that that's not at all an intended purpose for this.
And how will you let businesses know they need to, if the ordinance passes, then will the city notify them or?
We'll send a letter out to all four of the, well, five, I guess now.
It's 4.
Or,
Yeah, it was 3,
Okay.
so I already incremented that. Thanks for bringing that to us. I don't know if there's any questions or comments from the mayor, so we'll hold on to the conversation to allow her any concerns or questions to be addressed. And
That is something I would say that we would encourage, is that communication does come from the city, so that when they receive our mailings asking, or with the application and cover letters, that they're not surprised by that, and they're not reaching out to the city anyway with questions about if it's required, and they will anticipate receiving something from us if it's communicated from the city as well.
My suggestion would be that we send those letters out tomorrow or the next day so that they can come to the council meetings before this is voted on, and if they have any concern.
and do you know, is there a fee for the state license? Are they paying a fee for that?
The state fee is
pretty minimal.
$125.
Yeah,
So that is also one of the reasons that it doesn't have many teeth, is because of limited funding. It ends up kind of trickling into enforcement as well, at least on the state level of enforcement.
Emily, did you see the mayor? Okay.
Sorry?
No, I just wondered if she might want to participate, otherwise it's up to the chair to proceed, or?
And I had a couple of things, Director Griswold, that I wanted to mention, but limits on licenses, and so Councilman Panzera, you just mentioned that you increased it to, but on the copy I had, it was still at 3. I don't know if you've increased it now. but-
No, nothing has occurred. This is current form as
Okay.
prior to the meeting. That's why we're reviewing and hopefully improve it.
And then under that limits on licenses, where it has the 3, then that would be 4, and then right underneath it, in number 2, it says no new license may issue to authorize tobacco sales. And I wondered if may be issued, I wasn't sure about how that read.
I'm sorry, you're in number 2,
Oh,
Michelle? I'm sorry.
Under the limits
Yep.
on licenses, number 2.
Yep.
No new license may issue to authorize tobacco sales. I don't know if that's maybe.
Oh, or maybe, yeah, that's a Joel question.
If the number of tobacco retailers already issued equals the total number of authorized licenses pursuant. So I think the idea was to have the number never exceed the number as of the date of passage, which, so at this point, we'll say it's 4. Do we specify 3? Oh, yeah, we list limits above, so we'll change that to 4 in number 1. And then no new license may issue to authorize tobacco sales. We can just take out some of this verbiage, it's excessive, just to say, to exceed the total number. Let's see which chapter. And we didn't want to say as of the date of passage, because there's also the possibility that somebody ceases operations and then, resumes operations later or reopens their existing facility but with a different owner, that sort of thing. But we didn't want to, grow it to 5 or 6 or 10.
Clarify that just a little bit for us, if we don't use the date of passage as a certain date where the number of existing retailers is not able to change, then.
I mean, we can, if you want, in number 1, in J1, just say, shall be limited to the number in existence at the time of passage, or just say 4, just to be very specific. It's either is fine, it doesn't really.
Okay, well, if we use the quantity of 4, then we don't need to create or clarify language regarding number of licensed, 3 licensed retailers in operation, because they're not.
Okay, you want to just take number 2 out and just renumber the subsequent?
We can consider that. I don't want to make that call immediately because
Okay.
I don't quite have the legal expertise to say that would be ideal or not.
Okay,
But we can work that offline.
all right, sounds good.
I mean, the intent is clear. We just need to make sure that the language is structured to accommodate it and not create,
Ambiguity.
yeah, exactly, or contrasting statements. So, any questions from council or the mayor?
And also a quick on the next page on F, it says the mayor states authorized, that is may.
I'm sorry, did you say F, Michelle?
On F, the mayor, and then there's may authorize. So it should be may, I'm sure there is a space there between mayor and authorized.
Actually, I thought we took that out.
Oh, F altogether? Oh, it's right
F is-
after,
is
on
following
the next
page after.
page, after limits on licenses,
Oh,
at the top of it.
I had asked in an email for that to simply be removed, but I had
do you
not.
want F taken out? I thought that you told me in one of your follow-up emails that you wanted to leave her the discretion. If there was, I'm pretty sure you said if there was some viability, like, for example, let's just say hypothetically that, XYZ grocery chain wanted to open up in Grandview Heights within the city limits, but they sell tobacco products. If it's an economic benefit, in the opinion of the mayor, to have an additional grocery store, maybe
Yeah.
that gives her the latitude to do that.
Yeah, so an additional ordinance at that time, which would require action by council, I'd feel more confident with that.
Okay, so take F out.
Anything can
Did you guys have
change.
this discussion in my absence? Is that
No,
right? I'm remembering.
no, we didn't. No, we just had it.
And I was only questioning, because I thought there should be a word between mayor and
I know,
authorize.
Yeah,
when
yeah.
you brought it up, I was like, wait a minute, I
Yeah.
wanted that. Well,
Oh, and I'm sorry, I did have another question on, so the page that is, well, 523.12, it starts at the bottom of one page and it continues to the top from the next. But I wonder, it has here on the next page, like, there's number 4, which is sell or offer for sale any flavored tobacco product. And then after that, there's a B, no person shall give, sell, or offer to sell cigarettes, other tobacco products, or product paraphernalia, buyer from a vending machine. But down here, it talks about the vending machine, so that they shall obtain a valid license for each machine. I wondered if that should be,
cleaned up, yeah. Joelle, can you speak to that as,
I would think like one word.
yeah,
yeah.
So 14 just talks about the need to get a license if you own a machine.
And up above, under the number 4, that says sell or offer, it's saying you can't sell it through the machine.
okay, yeah, I don't think there's distribution available.
If it sounds duplicative, we could just remove B and 4 should be identified.
Yeah, it is.
You want to take
Yeah.
out B? Or,
Do we want to prevent that from being sold by machine?
Why don't we ask for some clarification on that in the interest of time?
Okay,
And we'll pursue that in either a later committee meeting or
Okay.
as,
do
you
we
know,
know
we'll get
of
some
any
clarification.
places that are selling liquor?
No.
Okay.
okay, so because the council meeting will start soon, I don't know if anybody has any other questions or comments.
I have a question, but you want to hold it off to the meeting?
The council meeting, yeah, we can do that.
It's between the chair and the president.
We're welcome to continue the discussion at the actual meeting.
Okay, that's me. Okay, then, let's see, at 6:01, we can end our safety committee meeting.
Yeah, before you adjourn, I'd like to request from the president that we allow for that reading to the best of ability to be advanced so that our guests can enjoy the evening. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The meeting is adjourned.
I think this is to accommodate